Good morning. This is the Blaine's World podcast that can be found each week on a whole bunch of places, but it can be found on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you name it. If you look for it, you'll be able to find us. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. And each week we focus on news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And to that end, it's my pleasure to introduce Susan Rosoff, is it? Am I pronouncing?
Yes, Suzanne Rosoff.
Rosoff, I'm sorry. Author of a book called, I love the title,
Therefore, choose life.
Therefore Choose Life.
Right.
And we'll talk about the book in a second. But before we do that, Suzanne, if you would, you can wave to all your fans and friends who are watching this. So if you're watching it, you want to wave to them and say hello to them? You give them a big wave?
There's a little something that says "Got it." It says this meeting is being recorded by
Right.
the.
That's cool. Yeah, you don't need to know that. Just
I click on "Got it."
no, you don't have to do anything. Just
Well,
wave to everybody.
Okay, I don't
Great.
see your face.
Okay, but that's Suzanne if you're watching.
That's
And
me.
okay, and Suzanne, I've known for a little bit, but I should tell you that before penning her book, which I just showed you, Therefore Choose Life, Suzanne has multiple careers producing award-winning documentaries for television, owner of a B&B Inn, an organic farm in the Berkshires, and Boston, and a ballroom dancing instructor on board cruise ships for 5 years. She was a major fundraiser activist for civil rights and women's rights, a singer, actor, dancer, cook, art collector, and owner. I love this, of Suzanne's Vegetarian Bistro restaurant in Miami. She's also, and we'll have to talk about this, a champion at playing Texas Hold'em poker. So the point is, I shouldn't play you in poker. Is that correct?
Yes, I love the game. I learned it at college
Yeah.
in
Actually,
UNCA.
well, actually, you should have me play you because I don't know how to play it. So you could take all my money if you
Good.
do you still play poker?
I haven't played for a little while, but I played all the time with a group at Ollie.
Yeah. All
And,
right.
they have their own building in UNCA. So I took classes, I took discussions, and I even took a creative dance class with your beautiful bride.
Okay. Yeah. I was telling her that's very
And
nice.
Ellen Pappas was in that class too.
Okay. Yes, Cynthia did teach that. But let's talk a little bit about you, Suzanne. So, when you were a little girl, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I was 3 years old. We were living on Munhall Road in Pittsburgh, and we were living in an apartment building, and there happened to be a dance studio in the basement, and it was run by Fred Kelly and Louise Kelly and a man named Gene Kelly. And Gene Kelly was my teacher when I was 3 years old. And he even taught me, my claim to fame, how to tie my shoes.
Wait,
But
no,
I wondered why he never took me to Broadway.
wait. So that was the Gene Kelly who became
Gene
famous.
Kelly.
Very
Gene
exciting. So
Kelly.
yeah, so you claim to fame.
That's
You were
my
t-
claim to fame with the movie stars.
you were taught to tie your shoes by Gene Kelly, and did you still remember how to tie your shoes?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
but the incredible
Yes,
thing,
all these 90 years.
but the incredible thing is people you don't wear shoes that tie that often. It's that much. But anyway, talk a little bit about. So you're a 3-year-old growing up in Pittsburgh. Did you always know at that point in time that you wanted to be a woman who did a whole bunch of different things? In other words, your career is just so varied. What did you want to be as a kid?
As a kid, I wanted to grow up. What I wanted to do. I
But
didn't have any goals at that time, and I married very young at 19.
Yeah.
And that's what women in the 50s did. That was our era. And that's exactly what we did. I went to college, and then I got married and had Melinda and Paul, my 2 children, which is a blessing today. And
When you went to college, did you study anything or?
no, I didn't stay long enough to get a degree.
So you went to college, you graduated, you had 2 children, and then all of a sudden, what got you into doing a whole bunch of things at that point in time? Like, when did you start deciding you didn't just want to stay at home all day?
Well, my marriage was falling apart, and so I needed something to do. So I found a singing partner, and we sang for Israel Bonds. We sang in cafes. We had a wonderful time, and it was a wonderful avocation. I did that, and then as a person who wanted to do a volunteer, I went to WQED TV, where Mr. Rogers' show emanates
Sure.
from, where he did anyhow. And I got a job as the assistant to the president. And I didn't know how to take shorthand. And he would dictate letters and I would write them out and he would sign them. And we got along great.
But I have to know, so Pittsburgh, so Mr. Rogers was on the show station at that time?
Yeah, definitely. I would see him in the studio.
Yeah.
In
So,
fact,
yeah.
I almost was his assistant when his assistant went out to have a baby, but she decided to come back to work.
So what's the story that what Mr. Rogers taught you? Or do you have any Mr. Rogers stories?
Well, Paul was on the program and Melinda, they were on the program.
Oh, were they really?
Yeah. What I did do at the station was there was a wonderful engineer named John, and he and I put together a co-ed black and white explorer troop. And we taught them lifetime, how to live life, how to live, have lifetime skills.
And
So
so, yeah.
that may have come from the Mr. Rogers. He was such a good man.
And you mentioned you were in a duo. What was the name of your partner in the duo?
Helen Sofer.
Yeah. Now, do we have a record of those performances anywhere, or did they ever do with it?
We never
Oh.
made a record. I've never made a record, but we were the Barry sisters. We sang in Yiddish. We sang in English. We were great. It was just the breaks. We didn't take off. I did a one-woman show in the Parkway Country Club in Churchill, which was a suburb of Pittsburgh.
Do you remember your first acting role?
My
The first time you ever performed?
acting role. I was 9 years old. He's really exploring my brain here.
Well, that's great. You're doing great.
I
Yeah.
was 9 years old and I was at the Stephen Foster Memorial in Oakland, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I played a Japanese woman ironing. So maybe I was younger than 9. I was probably 7. And my mother, I had long black braids and she wound them around my ears. And that was the bug that got me started in acting. And I
Because
did a lot in Asheville.
it's too bad you're no longer in the area. Because wouldn't this be a great idea, Suzanne, that everybody would kind of recreate their first role as a fundraiser? So I assume you were 9 years old. I assume they didn't have videotapes then, or you didn't have a record of that. Wouldn't that be fun that you could, for Paul and your daughter, you could recreate the very first role you ever did to, to pass on?
Who would send money for that?
Yeah,
I
well,
get a good cause. I very much support the hungry here. I don't think that in this country we should have anybody hungry.
oh, sure. Well,
So if I did a fundraiser, it would be for the hungry.
Well, talk a little bit about then the fact that you were mentioning too that you've done a lot of performing, and so when you came to Asheville, and that's how I think I first met you. My wife met you there as well.
Yes.
You kind of got, it seemed like the acting bug. Or talk a little bit about what you did in Asheville.
Oh, it was wonderful. About the acting itself.
Yeah.
I went for an audition and my first show, and there was a man sitting next to me, and he said to me, where do you live? We were just chatting it up. And I said, I live in East Asheville. He says, where? I said, off of Tunnel Road. He says, where? I said, River Knoll. He says, I live there too. And his name is Walter Goodrich.
Oh, sure.
And so we became very good friends. And I had several roles, but my favorite was Light Up the Sky by Moss Hart. And I played a young, if you could believe it, ice skater from Brooklyn. And he was my husband, a producer with a big cigar. It was my favorite role of all of them.
And I can see you doing that with Walter. And talk a little bit about where you acted, because I think that's a great story as well. How you did that was through the Act and Ollie.
Yeah, it was through Asheville Community Theater. Our group was called the Autumn Players, and we performed at 35 Below, the theater below the theater. But I heard that since then it's closed. But I had a lot of other activities in Asheville.
Well, what got you to Asheville, by the way?
Well, I was living in Maine.
Right.
The cold winters got to me. So I had several friends who were in the macrobiotic community. You know what macrobiotic is.
Sure.
So they were in the community, and I decided to come down. And when I came down, there was a house for sale. So I bought a house, and it was right on a creek, and it was a beautiful condo. I fell in love with it. And then I would have Friday night potlucks with my friends. And I also had a condo at the Indigo Hotel. So on 4th of July, I would have more parties, always potlucks, because the food was delicious. And we celebrated, and Walter was there, and Ellen and George Pappas were there. And I'm sorry, I didn't know you then.
No, I think I met you maybe shortly thereafter, kind of through Cynthia. But one of the things that was so cool about your experience in Asheville is you really got involved in the community, and talk a little bit about that. So it wasn't
Yes.
just through Ollie and through ACT, but you also got involved in just about everything else, it seemed like, in Asheville.
Well,
What was your thinking? You just wanted to see what the community was about, or you wanted to give back to the community? What was your goal in that?
definitely, as I mentioned, I don't believe anybody should go hungry. So I was very active with the Mana Food Bank, and I was active with what else was I active with? The Community Foundation of Western North
Oh,
Carolina.
sure.
And they would, for 15 years, put on these wonderful purse luncheons for a fundraiser. And they had wonderful speakers like Doris Keene Goodwin. They had Dee Dee Myers. They had Olympia Snow. And the best for me, of course, was Gloria Steinem, because when I was younger in the 70s, I flew to Washington, D.C. to march with her. And we marched for women's rights. And when my kids were little, I would take them to in Pittsburgh, I would take them to the Baptist churches so that we could sing "We Shall Overcome." And we would walk under they were building the U.S. Steel building at the
Right.
time in Pittsburgh. And I would be marching, and the steel workers would spit on us. And I said, I felt badly for my children, but then I realized that's what made them so strong today.
And what a way to bring them up too, in terms of seeing to give back to
Yeah,
the community.
yes.
Yeah,
And it's give back. We're so grateful for what we have in this country, that the idea is that we should give back to people. No shoulds, but
well, it seems that from what I know of you, that seems to be almost like your whole life, kind of giving back to the community or getting active in the community. And I have to ask you another story. It's in your book as well, but if you can talk a little bit about it. That for a part of your life, you were a dance instructor. Is that correct?
I was a dance.
Dance teacher.
Yes, but
Yeah.
before that, I started dancing at 3 with
Right.
Gene Kelly. Then I went to, in high school, I was with the dance troupe. And then I went as an adult, as over 60 years old, I joined a group called Dancers of the Third Age with the Liz Lerman troupe in Washington, D.C. And I'm so grateful because we danced our stories, our life stories, and it was very emotional. And we were so accepted that we performed at Kennedy Center. We performed at Wolf Trap. We performed at the dance place. And it was an experience that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So then I had my restaurant, which is another story. But I taught ballroom dancing on cruise ships. I was working at the restaurant from morning till night.
Well, hold off on the restaurant. Let's just talk a little bit about the cruise ship. So
Well,
how
the
do you,
cruise ship came because I was tired of the
right,
restaurant.
but okay, we'll go to that. But how do you get the gig to do cruise ships? Do you
Well,
just apply for it or?
no, I had a customer in the restaurant
Yeah,
who came to lunch every day, and he says, "I have a man I'd like you to meet. He's a wonderful man, and he teaches on ships." And I said, "I don't have time to meet anybody. I'm too
right.
busy with the restaurant." So this went on and on and on. Finally, I accepted. And we went out on a Saturday night. This man and I went out to Martha's in a famous supper club in Miami. And he found out that I could really dance. So he said, "I've got a gig on the riverboat going up the Mississippi. Would you consider coming on the boat with me for a week?" I said, "I don't know. Let me think about it if I can leave the restaurant." And I did decide to do it. And we did it for a week, and I was in heaven. Can you imagine just dancing every night of the week and teaching only when we once or twice a week? It was fabulous. So then I came back, and a month later, he said he had another gig that he could do on a riverboat. And we did it in the spring, fall, and winter. Do not take a riverboat on the Mississippi in the summer. It's it's too mosquito and too muddy and too hot. But we did it, and then after three of those, I was hooked. He said I could do this. I could do this all the time. He says we could go out on cruises around the world, 1 week, every 2 weeks, every month. He said we could do all that. And by then I was really burnt out from the restaurant. So I said yes. And that's what we did. We went to Australia, New Zealand, Tasmania, Alaska in the summer and winter. And I recommend people do go to Alaska in the summer. It's beautiful. And we
Well,
went to the Caribbean, and we went to Italy and Bermuda, where I hope the hurricane's not
sure.
headed.
So that was some way to see the world,
Oh, it was a
through your
great
dancing.
way to see the world. I'm so grateful. I've been very lucky with my choices or the choices that came to me in my lifetime. I'm so can't use the word grateful enough.
Now, how long did you do the dancing on the
Say
cruise
again,
ships? How long did you do that for?
I did it for 5 years.
Okay.
And the longest was the one to Australia. I had enough points in those days, and I was able to take first class from Miami to Los Angeles. And then Los Angeles, I stayed overnight with a friend. And then from Los Angeles, we flew to, I flew, because we each had separate points,
Right.
over New Year's Eve in a brand new Qantas airline. And at midnight, they toasted me with a glass of champagne and said, "Happy New Year." And it
Yeah.
was so wonderful. And the next day, I got off in Australia, and it was 104 degrees, and my hair just curled up.
Now,
But women will understand that.
before that, you mentioned, so you actually got that after you had done the restaurant business. And what got you into running a restaurant?
How did I get to a restaurant business?
Yeah.
Well, I lived in a community, in a neighborhood, and there was this charming little white, like hut, and there was a restaurant in it. And then one day, they, I talked to the chef, and he said he was closing it. Well, there's two things people want to do. They want to write a book, and they want to open a restaurant. I said, "Why not? I'll open a restaurant." So I hired a wonderful chef, Melanie Stewart, and she was able to take regular meals and make it completely vegan. I was very stubborn because I wouldn't serve any meat or fish. And I had a wonderful clientele, but I was arrogant about it at the time. I just wouldn't serve anything. But she did a pasta every day, and it was a different one. So we called it Pastability.
I love it.
And then one of my customers said, how could you do pasta without wine. So I said, okay, I don't know how to do it, but I went down to City Hall and I got a wine and beer license. And so we served wine with our pastability.
You were actually ahead of the time because at the time,
Yes,
vegan wasn't necessarily what it is now. And so even now, are you vegan now, or you still
I eat a well-balanced diet. I eat everything,
okay?
but I'm not much of a meat eater. But
Okay.
I like fish a couple times a week. And I just think positive. I love food. I'm a foodie. I love to eat, so I like to cook.
But at
I
the time, which is
I
unusual,
uh,
people weren't into that stuff. I guess you were introducing it to the area, or there weren't a lot of other people doing all vegan at the time.
oh, I was way ahead of my
I
time.
was going to say that. Well,
Yes,
it seems that that kind of describes a lot of stuff you do. That you're kind of ahead of the time.
I
Uh,
know.
yeah, it's a great
Always
story,
trying to catch
which I
up.
guess segues into the fact that so you opened the restaurant, got it, and then everybody else writing a book. What led you to write a book?
Well, you read my thank you very much for the intro, and
Right.
you see that I had many different careers. And when I would talk to friends and neighbors and acquaintances and even strangers, when they heard that all the different careers I had, invariably they would say you should write a book. So, like, to open a restaurant, I'll write a book.
How long did that take you?
Oh, it was a magical experience. I wrote it, first of all, 50 years ago. And I sat down every day and I put a piece of paper in the typewriter and I rolled it up. And I'd get up an hour later and there were words on a page. It was an incredible experience. And in 2019, I decided to resurrect it because so much that was in the book 50, 70 years ago or in the 70s, so much is relevant today. The professional woman is still trying to reach the glass ceiling. The single mother is still trying to put food on the table for her children. The abortion issue with Senator Graham from South Carolina. He
Yeah.
wants to make that a national against abortion. So and also our civil rights are still being uh, it's a terrible time for civil rights because people are losing their ability to vote. So I brought it back out in 2019, and I must say I've had some wonderful reviews.
Well, in terms of putting it together, so how long did it take you to finish the writing of it? Was that a arduous process, or were you able to do it pretty quickly?
Yeah, it was a process. It probably took months, but it took a long time in 2019. Remember, everything I had was on it was on a typewriter.
Right, right.
So I had to hire a wonderful neighbor, Ann Rimler, and she took everything and scanned it and sent it to an editor friend of mine, Sandy Tomlin. I think you know her.
I don't know. Go ahead.
Uh,
Yeah.
and she helped me edit it. The editing was wonderful. It took up a lot of my time. Paul and we lived together. Now, Paul says that I was always at the computer getting it ready for publication.
Well, if I can put you on the spot too, um, it's kind of ironic we're going to ask you to read something from the book, but it's just a beautiful piece you wrote. And I say ironic because you're now going to have to write an update to this too as well. But I read in the book you included a piece, and if I'll ask you to read it if I can. But you wrote a piece called "On Turning 80" by Suzanne Rosoff, and explain what was the reason you wrote that at turning 80. What led you to write it?
Well, I think something happened to me when I turned 80. I no longer cared what people's approval. Didn't need that anymore. And something happened to me. It's just a miracle. I became very happy. And as I said, I didn't need anybody's opinion. And I don't want any negativity around me. I just want positive people. If they're negative, I wish them well and I wish them on their way. I don't want to have any time to be with negative people. So
Well,
I'm a very happy person.
well, also, it seemed that, I don't know, when you turned 80 or right around that time, I guess I met you around that time or shortly thereafter, and it seemed you also got this tremendous group of people in Asheville. You know, you had like a fan club, it seemed like, but you knew just about everybody in Asheville, it seemed like, and you know, everybody kind of knew who you were, and I guess that's maybe in part because of the attitude. You just decided you were going to have a good time when you're out and
Oh,
about.
well, you have different groups, you have different organizations, you have different activities. Um, I guess I was a goer and I love Asheville. I would have stayed there, but the trip back and forth, the winters again, got too harsh for me as I got older. So the driving back and forth twice a year got to be too much, and that's why I had to leave. But I love Asheville. I it was a happy time for me.
Well, anyway, can you just share part of the book to give people a feel for what it's about? And by the way, another really cool thing about the book, I don't know if you can see it, but Suzanne, I love it. At the whole second half of the book, well, not second half, but the last several pages, she has all her pictures of a lot of times in Asheville. I don't see Gene Kelly in it though. That's the only
No,
person, you
didn't
know,
have a camera at that
or showing you
time.
how to shine your shoes. But so you wrote this piece, Suzanne, and it's on turning 80. So you're going to have to revise this or revisit it in a little bit because, you know, when we turn 90 and then 100, you know, you're going to have to update it every 10 years. But if you would, could you just share that little piece, if you would?
Yes, I'll be happy to read it because I put on my reading glasses.
Okay, great.
That's all right. All the big people on television put on their glasses. We keep reading articles that state 40 is the new 20 and 50 is the new 30 and 60 the new 40. Well, I am here to tell you that 80 is the new whatever you want it to be. I just celebrated my 80th birthday and it is a blast. I was talking to a couple of my girlfriends the other day who are a few years older, and we all agree that we have discovered the word that describes this time in our life. It is called freedom. What does freedom mean? Free to do, say, be, anything that brings you closer to your true self. No longer do we have to wear masks so others will see us as they want us to be. No longer do we have to say what others want to hear to be in sync with their ideas, thoughts, and their experiences. We are so over the need to be liked. The freedom is such a gift. It is like a warm, refreshing body of water that washes over us. Can you see us floating face up, smiling, and even laughing as we move around this body of water, not knowing where it will take us? That is part of the joy, the excitement, the warm pleasure of movement. Each day I wake up and I'm open to whatever this day brings to me. Asheville is a great place, not only for the younger population, but for those of us in the third age. The College for Seniors, which is now called OLLI, offers the enrichment programs where we can continue our love of learning new skills, share our ideas, and simply get off our butt and move our bodies. Last year, I even learned a new skill, how to play Texas Hold'em poker. My love of the theater was brought the many roles with the Autumn Players, which is housed in Act Downtown. Last fall, as a member of the Readers Theater, as I told you before, I played in Moss Hart's play, Light Up the Sky. I played the professional ice skater who is from Brooklyn, with a Brooklyn accent, no less. I am in love with life. I am so open to the beauty around me wherever I am, and the people I meet, new to me each day. I love hearing their stories, their experiences, and realize their experiences are mine. This age has brought me in a place where I no longer have judgment or criticism of others' experiences. Each of us is in our own path of life. And even though our childhood experiences, good or bad, they color what we do as adults. We each thrive our own choice. We each have our own choice to live our lives now as our very own person. Can you feel the power in that? So 80 is not only a joyous time, but it's a time to be powerful.
Beautiful. Can I ask you a favor?
Good.
Can I run that, my blog? I'd like to run that in my blog. Would that be okay?
Yes, I'd be very honored.
No, it's such a beautiful piece.
Thank you.
And I read it, and I asked you before, was it ever published? Well, you said maybe been published in a local weekly, but now you're going to be published, Suzanne, in Blaine's World. So you're on Blaine's World podcast, and now you're going to be in Blaine's World. We're going to make you a published author. You wrote that on turning 80. Are you now kind of getting ready for having to revise this in a couple of years when you turn 90?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
We'll have to do it every 10 years. But I mean, it's such a beautiful piece, and it's so on target. I love what you said. You just.
Well, you're challenging me, and I like challenges. So maybe I will give that some serious thought.
Well, but thank you for giving me permission, because I wanted to ask you that, if I can. And let me ask you, too, the amazing story of your life. So now you're whatever age you are. What's next on your agenda? So you've written a book, you've taught dance, you've run a restaurant, you raised 2 beautiful kids. What's next on your agenda?
That's a good question. I haven't got that far ahead. I'm planning a 90th birthday party. Do you want to come to that?
We'll have it in Nashville. I'm there. No, it was so bad. You did invite me to. You had a going away party, right? When you left Asheville.
Oh, Walter and Kay, his
Right.
wife, was living at the time. Had a beautiful 90th, a beautiful going away party for
Yeah.
me. It was wonderful. We even performed at our own party.
Oh, so on the agenda, do we have? Because the thing I love about you is that you're kind of always doing something, So anything on the agenda or down the road?
I'm open. It depends what opens up for me. I'll see. That's what makes life so juicy. I'm not prepared to say what's going to be. Let's see what comes into my life or what comes in for me. I'm excited about living, so we'll see what happens.
How about every morning when you get up? Do you do you always have something on the agenda, or do you have anything planned every day, or how do you do that?
No. I exercise twice a week. That's about the only thing I do. I shop with Paul. I cook, as I said, I love cooking. I do laundry. That's exciting. And I don't know, the day goes. I don't know where it goes, but it goes. I have friends, and I go out with them occasionally, but I'm not a card afternoon lady playing cards in the afternoon. It's just not my lifestyle.
How about with the pandemic? How'd that affect you?
Or stayed in.
Yeah, I can imagine. That must have been tough for you, though, was it?
No, it wasn't. I have a beautiful home. I have a beautiful lifestyle in my home. I didn't regret one day. And when we went out, we would put on our masks, which I still put on today. I will mention I didn't have the vaccine. So I just careful when I go out, and I feel good and healthy and strong.
And you said something else which was so beautiful, I think what you just said, is that, to not regret anything you did, or do. You just kind of do it, and to not have regrets. It's a great life. You mentioned him, and I know he's standing by the side there. Can you just have Paul come and say hello to us if he's still listening?
You wanted to say hello?
Hey, Paul.
That's great. He's right here.
Okay.
Hey, Blaine, how you doing?
Hey, buddy. Okay, there he is. That's Paul. And
there is Mr. Paul.
Okay, and we have to thank Paul, by the way. Thank you, because Paul was the one who graciously arranged me to interview you. So thank you, Paul.
It's your birthday present to him.
Okay, I think he said that. When's his birthday?
It was August 31st.
Okay, so this
I
is
think
late.
you asked him what he wanted.
Right.
What he wanted for his birthday, and I think you said he wanted you to read my book.
Right, and no, he not only just want me to read the book, but he wanted me to interview you too.
Oh,
So
interview me.
I thank you very much. Let me ask you one last question, if I can, Suzanne. So if people will hold the book up again. Very well done book. Therefore, what? By the way, what was the idea of the title? How did you come up with the title?
I think it comes from the Bible. I'm not positive, but when Paul was so ill, and when he was 13 years old, and when he had his disease, leukemia, it was a devastating time for the whole family. And so I had an experience that was electrifying. And I came away from that experience and I decided to choose life. And I walked into his room and I walked in with a smile, and I knew we would beat this disease, because this was in the 70s.
Right.
In the 95% mortality rate. And the other thing is Marcus Welby, Dr. Marcus Welby,
Right.
the television show. Every week they had the victim who had leukemia and he died every week. It's on CBS at 9 o'clock. So it was a time, but we decided to choose life.
But it seems that that's been your whole life then, which is a great summary of your life as well. Therefore, you choose life.
Yes.
And
And I've had wonderful experiences with my daughter, Melinda. We had wonderful experiences in Europe together. If you ever want to travel with your kids, that's a real eye opener. And it takes you to a deeper level. You get to know your family at a deeper level. It's a wonderful experience. I highly recommend it.
Suzanne, if somebody wants to get a whole copy of the book, what's the best bet?
You can go to Amazon. It carries it, or go to, where did I write it down? Book Baby. But I think it's store.bookbaby.com. That's who published it.
And I'll encourage
That's
anybody watching it.
store.bookbaby.com.
Okay. And if I can, I'll encourage anybody listening to the show, if they want to read about the life of kind of an amazing woman, this is the book to read. And maybe it'll inspire some other people to write their life stories, as a result of hearing your story. Anyway, Suzanne, I want to thank you for being my guest on this edition of Blaine's World podcast. I'd also like to thank Cappy Tassetti, my producer, and I look forward to seeing you, anybody watching or listening to this in the near future. And maybe we'll bump into each other if you ever come back to Asheville. What do you
I
think?
would love that. And thank you so much. I love being with you tonight.
Okay, well, I loved having you, and I appreciate Paul's efforts as well. And like I said, my hope is, where in Florida do you live?
In Boynton Beach, Florida.
Okay.
Boynton Beach.
How close is that to Lake Worth?
To Lake Worth,
Yeah.
about 20 minutes away.
Okay. Yeah.
Are you going to be in Lake Worth?
Sometimes that's where my daughter now lives. So,
Okay,
I'll
so
know.
let me know. I'll drive over and give you a hug.
okay, great. Anyway, pleasure speaking to you. Be well. And
Thank
best
you.
of Paul. Okay, thanks again.